When you pull back, you disrupt patterns of dependency and invite the other person to see you as independent, whole, and worthy of respect. This is not a strategy you use to trick someone. It is a shift in your energy and mindset that fundamentally changes the dynamic between you and them. Most people don't realize that relationships often become unbalanced when one person overinvests emotionally. You give too much, you reveal too much, you accommodate too much, hoping they will see your devotion and reward it with love and respect. But human nature is paradoxical. When something is always there, always accessible, always willing, it loses its perceived value. We are wired to take for granted what costs us nothing. That is why detachment is so powerful. It changes the cost. It introduces uncertainty, space, and scarcity. Suddenly, you are not predictable. You are not a given. The other person can no longer be sure you will always wait around no matter how they treat you. This uncertainty is uncomfortable for them, but necessary. Because respect grows in that gap. It forces them to confront the possibility of losing you, which in turn makes them appreciate what they once dismissed or overlooked. People respect what they believe they can lose. This is why detachment is the ultimate declaration of self-worth. It says, I don't need you to validate me. I don't need you to complete me. I am whole on my own. When you detach, you communicate with your actions, not your words. You stop explaining yourself. You stop negotiating your value. You stop begging to be seen, heard, or chosen. You simply live in a state of quiet certainty that if they want access to you, they will have to step up and earn it. This is where most people struggle. They fear that if they step back, the other person will simply let them go. And that's possible. It's the risk you take. But that risk is precisely what makes detachment meaningful. It's proof that you value yourself enough to walk away from anything that isn't mutual, respectful, or healthy. Detachment is not about control over them. It's about control over yourself. It is choosing to stop participating in a dynamic that leaves you drained, disrespected, or undervalued. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring about them as a human being. It doesn't mean you become cold, cruel, or vindictive. It means you recognize that clinging, pleading, or performing for someone's approval is not love. It's fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of being alone. Fear of being unloved. When you detach, you face those fears directly. You acknowledge them. And then you choose to act from strength, not weakness. This is incredibly liberating. It takes you out of the reactive mindset where you're always anxiously interpreting their words, their silences, their moods, their choices. Instead of asking, how do I make them stay? You ask, is this relationship worthy of me? Detachment is the end of emotional bargaining. You no longer make excuses for their disrespect. You stop blaming yourself for their indifference. You stop imagining that if you just love them enough, they will transform. People feel this shift, even if you say nothing. When you detach, your energy changes. You stop chasing. You stop over-explaining. You stop rewarding bad behavior with more access to you. Instead, you focus on yourself, your goals, your peace, your boundaries. You reclaim the time and mental space you used to devote to decoding their every move. And in that space, you heal, you grow. You remember who you are without their validation. This is the paradox. The more you center yourself, the more they are forced to see you clearly. When you detach completely, they are confronted with your absence. And in that absence, they notice what they lost. The softness, the kindness, the connection that they took for granted. The more you try to convince them of your worth, the less they saw it. But when you detach, You let the silence speak for you. Detachment isn't easy. It requires emotional discipline. It requires you to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing what will happen. It requires you to sit with the ache of missing them without rushing to soothe it by reaching out. It is a test of your ability to prioritize your self-respect over your desire for immediate relief. But this is precisely why it works. Because most people are unwilling to do it. They'd rather keep the peace on the surface while dying inside. But you're different. You are willing to feel the fear of letting go. You are willing to confront the possibility that they might not follow. And by being willing to lose them, you finally gain something priceless: your freedom. You free yourself from the emotional roller coaster of trying to manage someone else's behavior, choices, or feelings. You realize those things are outside your control. What you can control is your response, your boundaries, your commitment to treating yourself with the respect you want from others. When you detach, you break the cycle of codependency. You send a clear message: I refuse to participate in anything that diminishes me. I will not sell myself short for crumbs of affection. I will not remain in spaces where I am tolerated instead of celebrated. This isn't about arrogance, it's about self-honoring. And once you set that standard, you don't have to enforce it through words or ultimatums. Your absence does it for you. People who genuinely care will adjust. They will step up. They will meet you where you are. Those who don't will fall away. And that's okay. Detachment is how you sort the genuine from the convenient. It is how you clear space for relationships built on mutual respect rather than emotional manipulation. It is the filter that ensures only those willing to respect you have access to you. In the end, detachment creates the conditions where respect can take root. It teaches others that your love is a gift, not an obligation. That your time is valuable, that your presence is earned, not assumed. And when someone finally understands that, when they realize you are perfectly willing to walk away from anything less than you deserve, they have no choice but to see you as someone worthy of respect. Mastering your emotions is the first step to overcoming negative feelings, because emotions are the raw material that shape your perceptions, decisions, and responses to the world around you. Without mastery over them, you become a puppet of circumstances, reacting to every trigger, every insult, every disappointment. Emotional control is not about suppressing what you feel. It is about understanding it, accepting it, and then choosing how you will respond rather than being dragged around by your impulses. Most people believe their emotions are facts, that feeling hurt means someone has genuinely harmed them, that feeling rejected means they are unworthy, that feeling angry means they have been wronged. But emotions are not always reliable narrators of reality. They are colored by past wounds, insecurities, assumptions, and fears. Emotional mastery requires that you step back from this automatic identification with feeling and start observing it like an impartial witness. When you learn to detach from your emotional reactions, you create a gap between stimulus and response. In that gap lies your freedom. Imagine someone ignoring your message for days. Without control, you spiral. They don't care about me. I'm not good enough. I'll make them jealous. I'll beg for attention. All of these are reactions driven by fear and insecurity. Emotional mastery, however, says, I notice I feel anxious and rejected. Let me sit with that. Why does this trigger me? What story am I telling myself? Is it even true? This self-inquiry breaks the chain reaction. You can choose a different path. Instead of sending a desperate text, you breathe. Instead of plotting revenge, You let the feelings move through you without acting on them. You begin to see that feelings are visitors, not commands. They don't have to dictate your choices. This is emotional control. Not pretending you don't care, but refusing to let feelings make decisions for you. Mastering your emotions is the cornerstone of overcoming negative feelings because you are no longer at their mercy. Most negative feelings come from old patterns of thinking, ancient wounds that were never healed. Rejection hurts so badly because you tie it to childhood abandonment or the fear of not being lovable. Disrespect burns because you've been taught your value depends on others' approval. Emotional control is the practice of shining light on these patterns and questioning them. Instead of believing the thought, you interrogate it. Instead of feeding the pain with catastrophic predictions, you soothe it with truth. Even if they don't choose me, I am enough. This is not about lying to yourself, but about reminding yourself of your intrinsic worth, independent of anyone's behavior. Emotional mastery does not erase negative feelings. It makes them manageable. It prevents them from hijacking your peace, your dignity, your boundaries. Consider the power of stillness. When you control your emotions, you don't lash out. You don't act out of spite or desperation. You wait, you think, you ask yourself, what do I really want here? Do I want to be respected or just get temporary attention? Do I want to stay true to myself or win them back at any cost? Emotional control gives you choices. It gives you the clarity to see that the short-term relief of giving in to anger or fear often costs you your long-term self-respect. It also makes you unpredictable in the best way. When someone expects you to react wildly, to beg, to chase, and you do nothing, just remain calm. They are thrown off balance. They have to confront their own behavior. They realize you cannot be manipulated with guilt or silence or games. This calm, grounded energy is magnetic. It draws people toward you, not because you're performing for them, but because you are anchored in yourself. Emotional control is not about becoming cold or unfeeling. It is about feeling everything but being enslaved by nothing. It means you can be hurt but not destroyed. You can be disappointed but not desperate. You can miss someone but not betray your own needs and standards to keep them. When you have this level of control, you are no longer afraid of loss because you know you can handle it. You are no longer terrified of rejection because you don't base your value on someone's acceptance. This is the deepest form of freedom. It is the difference between reacting like a child who screams when they don't get what they want and responding like an adult who knows their worth and acts accordingly. It is the refusal to hand over the keys to your happiness to someone else's choices. You reclaim sovereignty over your inner world. You become a safe place for yourself. People respect those who have emotional control. They sense the difference immediately. Someone who can hold their ground calmly in conflict is seen as strong, not weak. Someone who doesn't crumble under rejection signals value. Someone who doesn't overreact to small slights signals confidence. And confidence, true confidence, is irresistible. It doesn't shout or demand, it simply is. Mastering your emotions also improves every aspect of your life beyond relationships. It makes you a better communicator because you listen instead of waiting to react. It makes you more resilient because you can handle setbacks without collapsing. It makes you wiser because you can see the bigger picture instead of being blinded by the heat of the moment. This is how you begin to overcome negative feelings in a lasting way, not by pretending they don't exist, but by learning how to manage them with grace, with awareness, with unwavering commitment to your own well-being. Boundaries teach others how to treat you. When you establish clear, firm boundaries, you are not being harsh, rude, or dismissive. You are defining what is acceptable and what is not. Boundaries are the rules of engagement you set to protect your mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Without them, you become a doormat for other people's expectations, whims, and even disrespect. It is not other people's job to guess what you will tolerate. It is your job to make it clear through your words, your actions, and your willingness to enforce consequences when those boundaries are crossed. Many people struggle with boundaries because they fear rejection, conflict, or being seen as difficult. They want to be liked so badly they sacrifice their own comfort and self-respect to keep others happy. But this is the path to resentment, bitterness, and emotional exhaustion. When you don't set boundaries, you send the message that your needs are less important than theirs. You train people to take advantage of your kindness. You show them you will accept treatment that diminishes you, and in the long run, this damages not only your self-esteem, but also the quality of your relationships. Boundaries are not walls designed to shut people out. They are doors with locks you control. You decide who comes in, how far they come in, and when it's time for them to leave. This clarity provides safety, predictability, and respect on both sides. When someone knows your boundaries and sees you uphold them, they may not always like it, but they will respect it. They know you will not compromise your values for their approval. Enforcing boundaries means you are willing to have hard conversations. It means saying no when you mean no, even if it disappoints someone. It means refusing to respond to disrespectful language or manipulative behavior. It means walking away from dynamics where your needs are ignored or invalidated. This is uncomfortable for people pleasers who have been conditioned to smooth things over, to avoid tension, to bend themselves into shapes that make others happy. But the truth is, without boundaries, there can be no real intimacy. Why? Because intimacy requires honesty. If you cannot be honest about what you need, where your limits lie, or what hurts you, then you are not truly connecting. You are performing. You are managing someone else's perception of you instead of revealing your authentic self. Boundaries are an invitation to real connection because they say, this is who I am. This is what I need. Can you respect that? If the answer is no, then that person is not for you. When you detach and set boundaries, you communicate non-negotiable standards about what you will and will not tolerate. You are no longer available for one-sided relationships where you give everything and receive crumbs in return. You are no longer willing to tolerate disrespect, inconsistency, or emotional games. You stop rewarding bad behavior with more access to you. Instead, you create consequences, distance, silence, withdrawal of your energy. This is not cruelty. It is self-preservation. It is refusing to abandon yourself to keep someone else comfortable. People will test your boundaries, especially if they benefited from you having none. They will accuse you of changing. They might call you selfish, cold, or unreasonable, but understand this. Their discomfort is not your problem to fix. It is the price of your freedom. It is the natural reaction of someone who is losing the ability to exploit your kindness. Boundaries redefine the power dynamic in your relationships. Without them, you are powerless. You wait for others to decide what they will give you. You hope they will treat you well out of the goodness of their hearts. But people don't respect hope. They respect clarity. They respect the person who says, this is what I need. This is what I will not accept. This is what happens if you cross the line. And here's the truth. When you enforce boundaries, some people will leave. Let them. Because the ones who remain will be those who value you enough to respect your limits. They will understand that your standards are not threats, but guidelines for mutual respect. They will see that you have enough self-worth to protect your own peace. And they will either rise to meet you or move aside. Either outcome is a victory for you. Boundaries also protect you from yourself, from your own tendency to overgive, to rescue, to fix, to prove your worth through self-sacrifice. They remind you that your responsibility is to yourself first. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot love others well if you abandon yourself in the process. Boundaries ensure that you stay whole, that you do not fracture yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. People sometimes think boundaries are rigid or unfeeling, but healthy boundaries are actually the foundation of compassion. When you know your limits, you can give freely without resentment. You can love without losing yourself. You can support others without enabling harmful patterns. You can show up fully because you know you are safe with yourself. This is why boundaries define value. They are the evidence of your self-respect. They are the signal you send to the world about how you expect to be treated. Without saying a word, your boundaries tell people, I value myself, and I expect you to do the same. They establish the terms of engagement. They set the tone for every interaction, and in doing so, they create the conditions for real, lasting mutual respect. True respect starts with how you see yourself, because every relationship you have with another person is shaped by the relationship you have with yourself. If you don't believe you are worthy, if you see yourself as lacking or unlovable, you will unconsciously tolerate treatment that confirms those beliefs. You will shrink your needs, soften your voice, and twist yourself into versions you think others will find acceptable. You will hand over your power just to be chosen, not realizing that in doing so, you are choosing to abandon yourself. Self-worth is not arrogance. It is not believing you are better than others or deserving of special privileges. It is the quiet, unwavering knowing that you have value simply because you exist. It is recognizing that you deserve kindness, respect, honesty, and consideration without having to earn them through perfection, people-pleasing, or endless sacrifice. Self-worth is the foundation of every healthy boundary you set, every standard you uphold, every time you choose yourself over temporary approval. When you lack self-worth, you will find yourself stuck in cycles of proving. You'll think, if I'm good enough, they'll love me. If I do everything right, they'll stay. If I sacrifice enough, they'll change. You make your value conditional on their acceptance. And in that desperate attempt to be chosen, you teach them that your love is cheap, that they can treat you however they want and you will still be there, that your forgiveness is guaranteed, your patience endless, your needs negotiable. Detachment is an act of reclaiming your self-worth. It is saying, I choose myself even if you don't. I respect myself even if you don't see my value. I will not stay where I am unseen, unheard, or disrespected. This choice is painful because it often means walking away from what you want. It means letting go of hope that they will change. It means facing your own fears of loneliness, rejection, and abandonment. But in that choice, you prove to yourself that your worth is not up for debate. People feel this energy. They sense when you are deeply rooted in your own value. It is the difference between someone who begs for love and someone who receives it freely because they expect nothing less. When you embody self-worth, you don't have to demand respect. It is given naturally. Others recognize that you will not entertain disrespect, that you will walk away at the first sign of being devalued. This is not because you are cold or uncaring, but because you refuse to compromise your dignity. Self-worth also changes the way you interpret other people's behavior. Without it, every slight feels personal. Every rejection feels like proof you are unworthy. Every conflict feels like a threat to your sense of self. With self-worth, you see things more clearly. You understand that someone's inability to love you well says more about them than it does about you. You can witness their behavior without internalizing it as a reflection of your value. You stop trying to fix them, save them, or convince them to choose you. Instead, you choose yourself. This doesn't mean you stop caring about them as a person. It means you care about yourself enough not to stay where you are mistreated. Self-worth allows you to hold space for both love and limits. You can feel compassion without accepting harm. You can wish them well without sacrificing your own well-being. You can walk away without hatred because you know that leaving is an act of love for yourself. Developing self-worth is not a one-time decision but a daily practice. It is noticing the moments you want to betray yourself to avoid conflict. It is resisting the urge to silence your needs to keep the peace. It is speaking up even when your voice shakes. It is choosing solitude over company that drains you. It is forgiving yourself for past mistakes and refusing to define yourself by them. It is looking in the mirror and saying, I am enough as I am. This practice is especially important when you feel triggered or hurt. Those are the moments when old wounds resurface, whispering that you are not good enough, that you must do more, be more, give more to deserve love. Self-worth is the voice that counters those lies. It reminds you that your value is constant, that you don't have to hustle for it or prove it to anyone. It gives you the courage to pause, breathe, and respond from a place of truth rather than fear. When you operate from self-worth, you attract different dynamics. You no longer seek validation from people who can't give it. You recognize red flags for what they are instead of painting them white. You choose partners, friends, and colleagues who respect your boundaries because you respect them yourself. You create relationships rooted in mutual honor rather than silent resentment. You experience the freedom of being fully yourself without the burden of managing others' perceptions. This is the quiet power of detachment. It is not about pushing people away, but about holding yourself in such high regard that you refuse to stay where you are not valued. It is knowing you don't have to fight for what is meant for you, that you don't have to accept less just to have something, that you are willing to wait, to walk away, to stand alone if it means preserving your integrity and your peace. Self-worth is the foundation for every choice you make. It determines the quality of your relationships, the boundaries you set, the treatment you accept. When you know your worth, you stop negotiating it. You stop explaining it. You simply live it, breathe it, embody it. And in doing so, you teach the world how to treat you, not through demands or ultimatums, but through the example of how you treat yourself. Stepping back provides perspective because when you are too close to something, your emotions can blur the truth and lead you to see what you want to see rather than what actually is. When you are deeply attached to someone, especially someone you care about intensely, your judgment often becomes clouded by hope, fear, and longing. You may ignore red flags, excuse hurtful behavior, or convince yourself that things will improve if you just try harder or love them more. This closeness can create a kind of emotional tunnel vision where you focus obsessively on one outcome: being chosen, being loved, being validated, and lose sight of the bigger picture of what you actually need and deserve. Distance is clarity. When you step back, even if it hurts, you create space between you and the situation that allows you to see it with new eyes. Instead of being lost in the heat of your emotions, you can observe what is really happening. You can ask yourself hard questions. Is this person truly respecting me? Do their actions match their words? Am I compromising my values to keep this connection? Am I staying because I want them or because I fear being alone? These questions can be terrifying to face, but they are necessary for growth. Often, people stay entangled in unhealthy dynamics because they cannot bear the thought of letting go. They think that maintaining closeness, even at the cost of their self-respect, is better than facing the pain of separation. But this is an illusion. Staying close to someone who mistreats you does not protect you from pain, it prolongs it. It keeps you in a cycle of hope and disappointment that drains you over time. Stepping back breaks that cycle. It is the first step towards healing. And distance also gives you the chance to reconnect with yourself. When you are obsessed with someone else, what they think, what they feel, how they act, you lose touch with your own needs and desires. Your identity can become wrapped up in trying to please them or win their approval. But when you step back, you return to yourself. You remember what you value, what you want, what you are willing to accept. You get to ask yourself, who am I without their validation? What kind of love do I want? What kind of partner am I willing to be? This reconnection is not about blaming the other person for everything, but about taking responsibility for your own well-being. It is realizing that you have the power to choose how you respond to their behavior. You cannot force someone to respect you or love you in the way you want, but you can decide what you will do if they don't. Stepping back gives you the emotional distance you need to make those choices from a place of strength rather than desperation. It also allows you to see patterns. When you are caught up in the moment, every conflict or slight can feel isolated like a one-time thing. But distance reveals repetition. You start to see that their apologies rarely lead to change, that their promises remain empty, that their words are inconsistent with their actions. Or perhaps you see your own patterns. The way you minimize your pain, the way you stay silent to avoid fights, the way you ignore your intuition. This awareness is painful but necessary. You cannot change what you refuse to see. Stepping back is also an act of self-respect. It communicates to both yourself and the other person that you will not participate in something that harms you. It is not about punishing them, but about protecting yourself. It is saying, I value my peace more than your approval. I will not stay in a dynamic where I am disrespected, dismissed, or taken for granted. This stance is powerful because it is not reactive. It is not a threat or an ultimatum. It is a quiet decision rooted in self-worth. Sometimes stepping back is the only way to truly test the strength of a relationship. When you are always there, always available, always forgiving, the other person has no reason to change. They know you will accept them no matter what, but when you remove yourself, you introduce the possibility of loss. This can be a wake-up call for them. It gives them the chance to reflect on their own behavior and decide if they are willing to meet you at your standard. But it's important to remember that stepping back is not a guarantee that they will change or come back. It is not a manipulation tactic. It is an act of choosing yourself, even if it means losing them. It is accepting that you would rather be alone than stay in something that doesn't honor who you are. And in that acceptance, you find freedom. Freedom from chasing, from pleasing, from settling. Freedom to heal, to grow, to invite relationships that truly align with your values. Perspective is a gift that only distance can give. When you are no longer wrapped up in someone else's story, you can write your own. You can see things as they are, not as you wish they would be. You can let go of fantasies and deal with reality. And while reality can be harsh, it is also solid ground. It is the place where real change, real healing, and real self-respect can finally take root. It is where you stop asking what you can do to make them stay and start asking what you can do to make yourself whole. By moving away, you create tension that can draw the other person toward you. This is not manipulation. It is the natural law of polarity in relationships. The more you push, the more others pull away. The more you chase, the more they retreat. But when you pull back, when you stop feeding the dynamic with your emotional energy, the balance begins to shift. The space you create becomes a mirror, showing the other person not just who you are, but who they've been. That distance becomes magnetic, not because you're playing games, but because you're no longer available for emotional dependency. People are drawn to strength, to mystery, to the person who is not emotionally desperate. When you detach, when you walk away and mean it, you activate a powerful psychological shift. The person who once took your presence for granted begins to notice its absence. The calls you used to send are no longer coming. The messages, the check-ins, the apologies, the reassurances, they stop. You no longer orbit around them. You no longer place them at the center of your emotional world. This creates a vacuum, and people notice vacuums. They feel that energetic silence. And in many cases, that silence is louder than anything you could have said. It's human nature to assign value to what is rare, what is hard to reach, what is no longer guaranteed. When something is always available, it's easy to ignore it. When someone is always giving, always sacrificing, always waiting with open arms, the mind registers that as low cost. But when you take that away, when you disappear from the emotional equation, you suddenly become high value. Not because you've changed anything about yourself, but because you've stopped overgiving. You've stopped showing up in spaces where you were being neglected or misunderstood. That absence shifts perception. We often think that speaking louder will make people hear us, but often it's silence that finally gets their attention. Your detachment sends a message. I am no longer invested in convincing you of my worth. I am no longer available for inconsistent behavior. I am no longer trying to fix what you refuse to acknowledge. That message is powerful. It shakes the ground of emotional complacency. And if the other person has any respect or regard for you, they will feel it deeply. But again, this isn't about reverse psychology. You cannot fake detachment and expect it to work. If you're still obsessed, still checking your phone, still emotionally entangled, your energy will betray you. True detachment only works when it's real. When you've truly chosen yourself over chaos, over dysfunction, over crumbs of affection. When you detach, not out of spite, but out of love for yourself, the energy shifts in an undeniable way. People can feel that. They can feel when you've stopped hoping. They can feel when your heart has truly let go. Polarity is what creates desire. Desire doesn't live in comfort zones. It doesn't thrive in predictability or routine. It exists in contrast, in tension, in space. When you pull away, you become the unknown again. You become the one who is not fully accessible. And suddenly the other person begins to wonder, why aren't they reaching out? Did I lose them? Are they done with me? This curiosity, this uncertainty can stir up reflection and even remorse. Sometimes the very act of stepping back gives the other person a chance to step up. They begin to reflect on their behavior, not because you forced them to, but because they are no longer shielded from the consequences. When you were constantly available, they never had to change. They never had to improve. They could afford to be careless because they knew you'd always be there. But your detachment changes the dynamic. Now they have to earn your attention. Now they have to question if they still have access to your heart. That pressure can bring about transformation, but only if they're willing. Not everyone will rise to the occasion. Some people will move on. Some will pretend not to notice. Some will blame you for walking away, and that's okay. The purpose of detachment is not to manipulate a specific result, but to restore balance, to bring you back to yourself, to end cycles of emotional chasing, to create space for what is truly aligned with your value. And in that space, only the right people will remain. The ones who respect you, the ones who see your absence as a loss, the ones who are willing to meet you halfway, not just when it's convenient, but consistently. When you stop initiating, stop fixing, stop trying to hold the connection together alone, you regain your power. You stop being someone who needs them and become someone they need. You stop being an emotional provider and start being a mirror that reflects what they lack. That tension between your absence and their desire is where respect is born. Not through force, not through pressure, but through the natural law of cause and effect. You remove your presence, and they are left to reckon with what that means. People cannot miss what's always in front of them. They can't appreciate what they never had to work for. But once you pull away, once you create that emotional distance, they are forced to confront your worth. And in many cases, that confrontation is what leads to growth, not just for them, but for you as well. You begin to see who they really are. You begin to see how strong you are. You begin to experience the power of not needing anyone to complete you. That power changes everything. It changes how you walk, how you speak, how you love, and how you receive love in return. The law of polarity is always at work. And when you master detachment, you let it work in your favor.